The science vessel Serenity's path trembled violently as it approached Earth's orbit, causing Commander Al's crystalline form to shimmer with an intensity that alarmed every officer on the observation deck. His geometric features, sharp angles and refracting surfaces that normally displayed calm, analytical colors, now pulsed with nervous light in waves of amber and deep violet. In 3,000 years of existence, Al had never experienced this sensation before. Genuine, primal fear. "Report," he commanded, his voice carrying the harmonic frequencies that denoted absolute authority. The word echoed through the observation chamber with an almost musical quality, reverberating off the crystalline walls of the ship itself. Chief Lyra approached the holographic display systems with practiced grace, her translucent body moving through the blue-white light like a figure made of frosted glass. Her skin flickered between colors as she manipulated the data streams with precise, fluid gestures, each movement calling forth terabytes of information extracted from thousands of human specimens. The data swirled around her in three-dimensional patterns, mathematical equations describing biological structures, genetic sequences, neurological maps. "Commander, I've analyzed 17,000 individual human specimens collected through our remote sensors," Lyra began, her voice trembling slightly. "Their biological systems are fundamentally chaotic, contradictory in ways that shouldn't be possible. They possess the neurological structure of apex predators, enhanced pain tolerance that would make most species incapacitated, rapid threat assessment capabilities hardwired directly into their amygdala, aggressive impulses that form the foundation of their emotional and cognitive architecture. These traits suggest millions of years of evolution as hunters, as killers." Navigator shifted his four legs nervously across the observation deck, his antenna-like sensory organs twitching. "Perhaps they're evolving beyond their instincts," he suggested hopefully. "Maybe they've reached a developmental stage where consciousness can override biological programming." Lyra's form darkened to deep purple, a color indicating profound distress in physiology. "That's precisely the problem, Commander. The evolutionary timeline doesn't support that explanation. The evolution shouldn't be possible, not in their fossil record suggests. Their skeletal structure shows signs of deliberate modification at the deepest genetic level. Some civilization, deliberately engineered these creatures. Someone took a baseline primate organism and systematically rewrote their fundamental nature." The observation deck fell silent. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the ship systems and the soft whisper of life support circulating through the chamber. Al moved to the massive viewport, his crystalline form refracting the light from Earth below into 1,000 scattered rainbows. The planet was beautiful, blue oceans, white clouds, continents of green and brown. It looked peaceful from orbit, innocent. Yet Lyra's analysis suggested something far more sinister lurked beneath that tranquil surface. "The collective has encountered 43 intelligent species," Al said quietly, speaking more to himself than to his officers. "Each one naturally evolved. Each one followed predictable developmental paths. Agricultural societies developed technology. Technology led to industry. Industry created philosophical systems advocating for cooperation and peace. Every single species eventually embraced the principles of the collective: harmony, knowledge-sharing, mutual respect." He turned back to face his team. "But these humans, they're different. They're violent in ways that suggest design rather than accident. If someone engineered them as weapons, then everything we believe about natural development is wrong." Lyra stepped closer, her form glowing with urgency. "There's more, Commander. I've identified 17 distinct modification points in the human genetic code. Each one is too precise to occur naturally. These aren't random mutations. They're signatures. Someone selected for increased aggression, enhanced tactical thinking, pain tolerance far above biological norms, rapid decision-making under extreme stress, and most damning, an almost supernatural capacity for violence when their survival is threatened." Al's geometric face turned toward her. "Who would do such a thing? Who would create an entire species designed for warfare?" "That's what terrifies me most," Lyra whispered. "We don't know. We have no record of such a civilization. And if someone created humans and then abandoned them, what other engineered species exist out there in the darkness?" The implications cascaded through the commander's consciousness like an avalanche. Everything about human history suddenly made sense. Their constant wars, their seemingly irrational violence, their capacity for both incredible cruelty and unexpected compassion. They were trapped between what they were designed to be and what they were trying desperately to become. "Open communications," Al ordered finally, his voice hardened with resolve. "We need answers from these creatures. We need to understand what we're truly dealing with." He had no idea that humanity was about to teach the entire galaxy what it meant to be something more than your design. Fighter jets screamed across the sky above Washington, D.C., their titanium bodies cutting through clouds at supersonic speeds, leaving trails of condensation that looked like white scars across the blue sky. The pilots, men and women selected from humanity's most elite military programs, were terrified in ways that no combat simulation could have prepared them for. Their training had encompassed every conceivable threat: enemy aircraft, surface-to-air missiles, coordinated ground attacks. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared them for the moment when an alien vessel simply appeared in Earth's atmosphere. The shuttle hung in the sky like a nightmare rendered in chrome and impossible geometry, its form seeming to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could properly process. Pilots reported seeing edges that bent at angles that shouldn't be possible, surfaces that reflected light in ways that violated every law of physics humanity understood. It descended slowly, deliberately, toward the designated landing zone outside Washington, D.C., a choice the aliens had made after consulting with human authorities about appropriate locations for first contact. General stood in the Pentagon's war room, a subterranean command center buried beneath hundreds of feet of reinforced concrete and steel. Around him, dozens of screens displayed real-time satellite feeds, thermal imaging, radiation detection, every sensor humanity possessed trained on the alien vessel. His jaw was clenched so tightly his teeth ached. He'd spent 40 years in military service, 40 years of making decisions, training soldiers, fighting in conflicts across 3 continents. He'd made choices that cost lives, decisions that haunted him in quiet moments. He'd stared into the faces of death and chosen to pull the trigger. But this was different. This transcended every framework he'd developed over 4 decades of warfare. "What are we looking at?" he demanded, his voice carrying the absolute authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed instantly. Colonel, the chief analyst, straightened her spine. "Sir, the vessel is consistent with advanced extraterrestrial technology. No weapons signatures detected, at least not by our sensors. But that doesn't mean weapons aren't present. Our detection capabilities are primitive compared to what we're dealing with." The secure communications channel crackled to life. The president's voice came through, tense but controlled. "Stand down all offensive operations. This is a direct order from the commander-in-chief. We communicate or we die. There are no other options available to us. The world is watching. If we attack and fail, humanity ends today. If we attack and somehow succeed, we lose the opportunity to learn from a civilization thousands of years more advanced than we are. Stand down." Watched as the alien forms emerged from the shuttle's open bay. They were beautiful and terrifying simultaneously, beings of light and geometry that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could properly perceive. They moved with fluid grace, their forms shifting and adapting to Earth's atmosphere, their crystalline structures refracting sunlight into displays of pure color. One stepped forward, its form stabilizing into something almost humanoid, though still fundamentally other, and spoke words that the translation matrix, developed by the world's greatest linguists in the 48 hours since they announced their arrival, rendered into perfect English. "We are the collective. We come in peace, bearing knowledge and the promise of partnership with your species. We seek understanding and cooperation, not conquest." The words should have brought relief. Instead, felt his stomach twist into knots. In his 40 years of military experience, he'd learned a fundamental truth. When someone emphasized they came in peace, they were usually about to do something violent. It was a paradox he'd observed repeatedly. Predators always announced their peaceful intentions before revealing their true nature. Over the following 3 months, the distributed technological gifts. They provided designs for clean energy systems that could end humanity's reliance on fossil fuels. They shared medical protocols that could cure diseases, cancer, Alzheimer's, heart disease, that had plagued humanity for. They offered agricultural techniques that would end world hunger permanently. Diseases that had killed millions were suddenly eradicated. Poverty began to dissolve. Within weeks, the World Health Organization announced that preventable deaths had dropped by 80%. Humanity celebrated. News networks broadcast images of the first humans cured by medicine. Children who would have died from genetic diseases now lived. Mothers held babies who would have been stillborn a year earlier. It was miraculous. It was salvation. But remained suspicious. His hands, which had fired countless weapons over 4 decades, remained clenched. In the part of him that had survived decades of warfare, the part that made split-second decisions under fire, something whispered, "This is too good. This is a trap. They're softening us before they strike." He couldn't articulate why. They had given no indication of hostility, but his instincts, honed by 40 years of combat, screamed that something was fundamentally wrong. That suspicion, born from humanity's greatest weakness, would become its salvation. Lyra worked alone in the laboratory aboard the Serenity's path, isolated from the other researchers by her own choice. Her translucent form glowed with the intensity of her focus, cycling through colors that indicated obsessive concentration, deep oranges and burning reds that pulsed in rhythm with her mental exertion. The human genetic code had haunted her since first contact, a puzzle that refused to fit into any framework the collective had developed over of studying alien species. She ran the analysis again, and again, and again. Each time checking her methodology obsessively, examining every variable, questioning every assumption. The results were identical. The results were impossible. The laboratory's walls displayed cascading streams of data, DNA sequences millions of times, genetic markers highlighted in screaming colors, statistical probability analyses that made no sense. 17 distinct modification points, each one screaming the same terrible truth, deliberate engineering, not accidental mutation, not natural evolution, design. Lyra's form began to dim, the vibrant colors fading to somber purples and blacks. She initiated an emergency request for a private meeting with Commander Al, using protocols designated for information of the highest sensitivity. When Al arrived at the laboratory, his form was already darkening with concern. He'd received only the briefest notification, crisis, immediate consultation required. The commander materialized in the doorway, his geometric features sharp with apprehension. "Show me," he commanded, his harmonic voice carrying undertones that suggested he already suspected the magnitude of what Lyra was about to reveal. Lyra manipulated the holographic DNA sequences with trembling gestures, zooming into the specific markers that had consumed her thoughts for 72 hours of continuous analysis. The massive double helix structure rotated in the air between them, massive and complex, its billions of base pairs rendered in stunning detail. The human genetic code contains 17 distinct modification points, Lyra began, her voice barely above a whisper. Each one exhibits characteristics consistent with deliberate genetic engineering. Not recent engineering, these modifications are thousands of years old, deep enough in the genetic structure to appear entirely natural to observers without our level of technological sophistication. But observe the precision here, here, and here. She highlighted sections in burning red, the color so bright it seemed to pulse with its own light. These markers are signatures. They're mathematical patterns too perfect, too precise to occur through random mutation or natural selection. Someone systematically selected for specific traits. Enhanced aggression, elevated testosterone and dopamine production in response to threat stimuli, extraordinary pain tolerance, approximately 300% above baseline primate standards. Enhanced tactical thinking capabilities, neurological structures optimized for rapid strategic analysis. Increased muscle fiber density, accelerated healing response to trauma, and most damning of all, Lyra paused, her form flickering with distress, an almost supernatural capacity for violence when threatened. It's not just instinct, it's hardwired, it's engineered. Al's crystalline form began to fragment, his structured geometric angles losing coherence as his consciousness struggled to process the implications. His colors shifted erratically, fear, confusion, horror cycling through his being in waves. They were built, he finally managed, his voice hollow, as weapons. Not just weapons, Lyra continued, pulling up additional data streams that seemed to multiply endlessly across the laboratory's displays. War machines, soldiers, combat units. Someone took a baseline hominid species, primitive, weak, unsuitable for warfare, and systematically transformed them into apex predators, into killers, and then, most inexplicably, abandoned them on that planet with only fragmentary historical records. Whoever created them left no instructions. No guidance, no purpose statement, no explanation. They simply left them there to develop naturally, despite the genetic modifications ensuring they would be fundamentally predatory. Al moved to the observation window overlooking Earth, visible in the darkness of space like a jewel suspended in endless black. His form hardened into sharp, aggressive angles, a physical manifestation of his crystalline structure responding to emotional distress. "This violates every principle the collective stands for," he said, his voice carrying dangerous undertones. "Any civilization capable of engineering warriors would be fundamentally dangerous beyond measure. If they created humans and abandoned them like defective products, what other engineered species exist out there in the darkness? What if this is a pattern? What if there are dozens of engineered species scattered throughout the galaxy, each one potentially unstable, each one potentially a threat?" The implications cascaded through both their minds like an avalanche gaining momentum down an infinite mountain. Everything about human history suddenly became comprehensible. Their constant wars, their seemingly irrational violence, their inexplicable capacity for both incredible cruelty and unexpected compassion. They were trapped, designed for warfare, yet simultaneously capable of transcending that design. They were trying to be something other than what they were engineered to be. And nobody knew if they would succeed. The laboratory fell silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. In that silence, two civilizations' entire understanding of what humanity represented shifted fundamentally. Everything was about to change. General sat across from Commander Al in the neutral meeting chamber, deliberately designed with furniture suitable for both human and physiology. The human side featured a standard military chair, ergonomic, utilitarian, uncomfortable enough to keep occupants alert. The side displayed a crystalline structure that seemed to shift and adapt to Al's form, providing support while allowing his geometric body to maintain its characteristic fluidity of movement. Between them lay the genetic evidence, displayed in stark, undeniable clarity on holographic screens that floated in the recycled air of the chamber. Had already reviewed the data 3 times, 3 separate analyses, each conducted by different teams of human geneticists, each producing identical conclusions. He felt remarkably calm, considering his entire worldview had just been obliterated. 40 years of military training had taught him that panic was a luxury reserved for those who had the time to indulge it. He didn't have that time. "You're telling me," said slowly, choosing his words with the precision of a man who understood that language could be a weapon, "that humans were engineered as warriors by some ancient, now extinct civilization. That our capacity for violence, our tactical thinking, our aggression, all of it was deliberately designed, not evolved naturally through millions of years of environmental pressure. And you're terrified that we're going to become a galactic threat, because we possess the capacity to wage war on scales your peaceful civilization has never imagined." Al's form flickered with colors had learned to interpret as affirmation, though the undertones suggested deep discomfort. "Yes," the commander replied without hesitation or evasion. "You were created for a specific purpose. That purpose may be dormant in your current civilization, but it may also be waiting to activate at some critical moment. Your species has already proven your capacity for mass violence on your own world. You've waged thousands of wars across a single planet. You've built weapons capable of extinction-level destruction. You've developed nuclear technology, biological weapons, chemical systems designed to maximize human suffering. Now you're reaching into space. Now you're achieving and potentially accessing weapon systems beyond your current understanding. If your engineered nature suddenly activates, if your genetic programming reasserts itself, humanity could become the greatest threat the galaxy has ever encountered." "Then what?" interrupted, leaning forward with the intensity that had made him one of humanity's most respected military commanders. "You'll imprison us on our planet, destroy us preemptively, implement some kind of quarantine that prevents us from ever accessing advanced technology. What exactly are you proposing, Commander? Because I need you to be absolutely clear about the threat you're alleging." His hands remained visible on the table, a deliberate choice. Military protocol taught that visible hands decreased threat perception, established trust in high-stakes negotiations. He was treating this conversation like a hostage negotiation, like an attempt to de-escalate a potentially lethal confrontation. Al's form shifted uncomfortably. The crystalline structures comprising his body refracted light differently when he experienced emotional distress, creating patterns that suggested confusion and fear in equal measure. "We don't have precedent for this situation," Al admitted, his harmonic voice carrying undertones of uncertainty. "The collective has explored 43 intelligent species. Each one developed naturally. Each one followed predictable patterns. We established protocols for peaceful integration. But you don't fit the model. You're unpredictable." "Commander, I've got news for you," said, his voice taking on the tone of a teacher addressing a student who'd missed a fundamental point. "We were built for war, yes. That's undeniable based on the genetic evidence you've presented. But we've spent the last 500 years, arguably the last several thousand years, learning not to be what we were designed to be. We've created international courts of justice. We've established peace treaties and non-aggression protocols. We've built international organizations dedicated to preventing warfare. We've created philosophical systems advocating for nonviolence. We've written poetry and music and literature that celebrates compassion and connection rather than conquest and domination." Stood up, packing the chamber with the restless energy of a caged predator. "My daughter is a teacher. She spends her days educating children, expanding their minds, preparing them to build better societies than the ones we inhabited. My son is a doctor. He spent 15 years training to save lives, to heal injuries, to reduce human suffering. My wife spent 30 years, Commander, treating the victims of violence, rehabilitating people broken by war, helping them rebuild their lives. That's what humans are. Not the weapons we were designed to be, but something we chose to become despite that design." Returned to his seat, his dark eyes meeting Al's flickering form directly. "You might be right. We might fail. We might revert to our original programming. Some humans might activate their aggressive tendencies and wage wars that would make our historical conflicts look like minor skirmishes. That's a genuine possibility, but that's not a reason to imprison or destroy an entire species. That's just life. Every intelligent species has the capacity to do harm. You're just uncomfortable because you're facing a species that knows it was designed for warfare and is fighting that nature anyway. That makes us dangerous in a different way than you expected. More unpredictable, more complex, more human." The conversation lasted 8 hours. By the end, Al had requested an emergency meeting with the collective's governing body. The decision would reshape the galaxy. Mars wasn't red, not really. Not up close, where the details revealed themselves to those willing to look carefully. The soil was rust-brown and streaked with minerals that caught the sunlight in unexpected ways, creating subtle patterns of color that shifted with the angle of observation. But from orbit, descending through the thin Martian atmosphere, the planet appeared as crimson as blood, and Dr. Sarah, General's daughter, the teacher, the idealist, couldn't help but notice the terrible irony as she stepped out onto the Martian surface as part of the joint human colony mission. The moment her boots made contact with the russet regolith, her suit's communication system crackled to life, broadcasting her words to the entire colony. "Welcome to humanity's future," she whispered through the comm system, her voice trembling with emotion she couldn't quite suppress. "Welcome to the place where two species learn to build something together instead of tearing each other apart." Colony had been Al's idea, a test of sorts, though neither species was entirely comfortable acknowledging that truth explicitly. Humans and would work together, sharing resources, coordinating efforts, building something collaborative that benefited both civilizations. If the experiment succeeded, if humans and could genuinely cooperate, could subordinate their individual needs to collective goals, it would prove that human aggression could be channeled productively, sublimated into constructive purposes. If it failed, if violence erupted between the species, if territorial disputes or resource conflicts sparked open warfare, well, the collective had contingency plans that involved containment fields and planetary quarantine. They had weapons. They had options humanity would find terrifying. Sarah worked as a teacher in the colony's educational sector, a sprawling complex of interconnected habitats designed to accommodate both human children and young. Her curriculum focused on cross-cultural understanding, bridging the gap between species that had evolved under completely different environmental pressures, with fundamentally different biological needs and cognitive frameworks. It was delicate work, filled with the potential for misunderstanding, for cultural offense, for the kind of miscommunication that could spark conflict. But something remarkable happened that none of the colony planners had anticipated. The children didn't care about genetic engineering or evolutionary programming or the terrifying possibility that humans had been designed as weapons. They simply wanted to understand each other. A human boy named after her father, in fact, became genuinely fascinated by the way children experienced light and color differently than humans. He spent hours examining their crystalline structures, asking questions, genuinely curious rather than fearful or suspicious. A young named, whose form was still developing, still acquiring the sharp geometric precision that characterized adult, found herself drawn to human music. She listened to recordings of and of contemporary composers of folk music from cultures across Earth. The mathematical patterns in human music resonated with her crystalline nature in ways that created unexpected beauty. Sarah watched these interactions with cautious hope. Perhaps Al's experiment would succeed. Perhaps humans and could build something meaningful together. Then came the day the drilling team broke through. The alarm sirens shrieked across the entire colony with a sound that sent adrenaline spiking through every occupant's nervous system. The wailing electronic shriek cut through the gentle hum of life support systems and the ambient background noise of a functioning human settlement. Sarah was in the educational sector when the announcement came through the emergency broadcast system, the words spoken by Chief Engineer with barely controlled urgency. Structural anomalies detected in subsurface drilling operations. Repeat, structural anomalies in the deep excavation zone. All personnel maintain current positions. This is not a drill. The colony fell silent. Everyone understood what those words meant. They'd found something that shouldn't exist on Mars. The deep excavations, conducted by human and engineers working together, drilling kilometers into the Martian crust, searching for water, ice, and mineral deposits, had pierced through bedrock and discovered something else entirely. A chamber, carved from solid stone with precision that suggested technological capability far beyond anything Mars should contain. Within hours, the evidence was undeniable. Ancient structures, not human, not something else. Something that predated both civilizations by scales of time that made human history look like a single heartbeat. The chamber contained technology that glowed with inactive power. Crystal matrices some the size of human bodies. Instruments whose purposes were incomprehensible to human and scientists alike. Equipment that seemed to exist partially in dimensions humanity's instruments couldn't properly measure. And everywhere, on the walls, embedded in the stone itself, carved into the very bedrock of Mars, were the same genetic signature markers found in human DNA. They were here, Lyra breathed into the recording system, her form glowing so brightly that researchers had to shield their eyes against the intensity. The ones who created your species, they came to Mars, they visited this world, they left. Gifts or warnings or instructions, we don't know which. A message was discovered embedded in the chamber's structure, encoded in mathematical sequences so elegant, so perfectly balanced, that human mathematicians and logicians both wept upon examining it. The mathematics was beautiful in a way that transcended species boundaries. But nobody dared decode it. The collective's governing council sent urgent communications to the Mars colony. Destroy the chamber, seal it, do not, under any circumstances, attempt to read the message. It was too dangerous. The implications were too profound. Humanity might not be ready for whatever truth that message contained. General watched the standoff develop on the colony's observation deck from Earth. His hands clenched into fists, so tight his fingernails drew blood from his palms. His daughter was down there, on Mars, exposed to whatever this discovery represented. Every human on Mars was effectively hostage to a decision made thousands of years ago by beings nobody understood, beings who had engineered an entire species and then vanished from history. "We need to know," he said quietly to the empty command center, his voice carrying the weight of a man who understood he was about to propose something that could destroy everything. "Even if it destroys us, we need to know who we are." The words would echo through human history, setting in motion events that would reshape the galaxy forever. Dr. Sarah couldn't sleep. None of the human colonists could. The sealed chamber haunted them like a ghost, a mystery locked away in stone and crystal, containing answers to questions that had plagued humanity since the first moments of recorded history. Where did we come from? Why were we designed? What was the purpose behind our creation? Who were the beings who engineered us, and then simply abandoned us to our own devices? The guards maintaining the perimeter around the sealed chamber had their orders clearly defined by Al himself. Absolutely no human contact with the chamber. No attempted investigation. No decoding of the message. No unauthorized approaches. The guards, crystalline beings whose forms seemed to shimmer with barely contained tension, rotated in shifts, their geometric structures positioned at key access points, making it physically impossible for humans to access the chamber without direct confrontation. On the fourth night, unable to sleep, tormented by questions she couldn't answer, Sarah made a choice that would echo through human history and fundamentally alter the trajectory of the species. She gathered 5 colleagues: Dr. James Martinez, a brilliant linguist who'd spent 2 decades studying human language evolution; Dr. and Dr. Robert, both mathematicians whose work with quantum computation had made them indispensable to the colony's operations; Dr., a physicist specializing in exotic matter and energy manipulation; and an engineer whose intimate knowledge of the colony's infrastructure made him invaluable to any covert operation. "I'm not asking anyone to risk their careers," Sarah said quietly in the abandoned maintenance sector where they'd gathered, far from observation systems and guard patrols. "I'm not asking anyone to commit treason, but humanity deserves to know the truth about itself. We deserve to understand our origins. We deserve to make informed choices about our future, even if those choices are difficult or dangerous." Shifted nervously, his eyes darting toward the sealed entrance to the maintenance tunnels. "They have made their position clear, if we're caught." "Then we face the consequences," Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying the same quiet determination that had defined her father's military career. "But we face them knowing we did what was right. We face them understanding that we fought for humanity's right to self-determination." She'd spent 3 weeks mapping the security patterns, studying the guard rotations, analyzing the blind spots in their observation systems. Military training ran deep in the family. Her father had taught her that victory required preparation, planning, and the willingness to act decisively when the moment arrived. The translation matrix was kept in the research center, a facility that housed the most advanced linguistic analysis equipment in human or possession. Borrowing it was technically theft, though Sarah preferred to think of it as necessary acquisition for species survival purposes. Her team moved through the colony's maintenance tunnels like ghosts, staying out of sight of the observation systems, timing their movements to coincide with guard rotations. The theft itself took less than 8 minutes. In an abandoned substation, a maintenance hub constructed during the colony's initial expansion phase and never fully integrated into the operational infrastructure. The 6 humans surrounded the crystal matrices they'd extracted from the ancient chamber. Sarah's hands trembled as she activated the translation matrix, the device humming to life with a frequency that made her teeth ache. She directed it at the data storage components extracted from the chamber's walls, at the message encoded in mathematical sequences that had haunted her thoughts since discovery. Mathematical sequences began translating, flowing through the translation matrix's processing systems. Historical records materialized, accounts of civilizations that had risen and fallen across the galaxy. Scientific data, theories of physics that human scientists wouldn't develop for centuries. And then gradually, in increasing clarity, narrative descriptions. History, purpose, truth. "Read it," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible in the dim red lighting of the substation. "All of it. We need to hear everything. We need to understand the complete truth, no matter how terrifying it might be." James Martinez leaned forward, his eyes scanning the translated text that scrolled across the holographic display. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of profound discovery. "Oh my God, Sarah, you need to see this. You need to see what this message actually says about us." The 6 humans stood together in that abandoned chamber, bathed in the red glow of emergency lighting, staring at words that would transform everything humanity believed about itself. Each sentence revealed new layers of meaning. Each paragraph unveiled truths that had been hidden for millions of years. Outside the substation, the guards continued their patrols, unaware that humanity was about to discover the most dangerous and beautiful truth in galactic history. The moment of revelation had arrived, the moment when humanity would learn what it truly meant to be human. The translation matrix continued its work, rendering mathematical sequences into language that human minds could comprehend. The first section described a civilization called the progenitors, beings of remarkable brilliance and sophistication who had dominated the known galaxy 1 million years ago. They were philosophers, engineers, artists, beings whose intellectual achievements had shaped the fundamental understanding of physics, mathematics, aesthetics, and morality across their entire civilization. For 10,000 years, they existed in harmony with the other spacefaring civilizations. The translation continued, Doctor reading aloud, her voice trembling with emotion. The progenitors established trade routes, shared knowledge, facilitated cultural exchange. They believed in peaceful coexistence as the ultimate goal of any advanced civilization. They were in many ways a mirror image of the collective. But then the message's tone shifted dramatically. The narrative darkened. The words became more urgent. Then came the void predators. Sarah felt ice crystallize in her veins as the message detailed how an aggressive, carnivorous species, entities whose evolutionary development had optimized them for consumption and conquest, had emerged from the spaces between galaxies. The void predators possessed no capacity for empathy, no understanding of cooperation, no interest in anything except expansion and consumption. They were, in essence, biological imperialism given sentient form. For 1,000 years, the void predators consumed everything in their path, the translation continued. Worlds were destroyed, civilizations fell, billions of individuals perished. The progenitors, despite their advanced technology, despite their intellectual sophistication, couldn't win through conventional means. They were outnumbered, they were outmatched, they were quite simply dying. Gripped Sarah's shoulder, her fingers digging in with barely controlled tension. This is describing genocide. This is describing the systematic extinction of an entire galactic civilization. The message continued. The progenitors made a choice. In desperation, facing complete annihilation, they decided to create something new, something they themselves were not. They would engineer perfect warriors, not clones or artificial intelligences, but living, thinking, moral beings capable of violence when necessary, but possessing the capacity for conscience, for compassion, for moral reasoning. James Martinez's eyes widened as he read the next section. Oh God, they're describing us. They're describing the engineering process that created humanity. The message unfolded like a revelation, describing how the progenitors had taken baseline primate organisms and systematically modified their genetic structure. They selected for aggression, tactical thinking, pain tolerance, rapid decision-making under stress. But simultaneously, they engineered capacity for empathy, for abstract reasoning, for moral contemplation. They would place these engineered species on worlds throughout the galaxy, the translation continued, in environments harsh enough to force natural development of sophisticated societies. They would leave knowledge caches on nearby planets, not as gifts, but as tests. Only species who had evolved beyond their violent origins, who had chosen philosophy and compassion despite being built for war, would be deemed ready to receive the knowledge within. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she read the next words. If you are reading this message, you have achieved something the progenitors themselves doubted possible. You have been engineered for war. You have possessed the capacity for dominance, violence, and conquest. Your genetic structure was designed to make you killers, yet you have chosen otherwise. You have built art, music, philosophy, and love. You have created moral systems despite lacking the genetic programming for empathy. You have transcended your own design. This is transcendence. This is evolution beyond engineering. This is hope. The final section of the message contained coordinates, star systems, precise locations, mathematical designations that corresponded to other worlds and other systems. The message provided a list, 37 locations, 37 engineered species, each with their own hidden chambers, each with their own tests, each waiting to be discovered by civilizations ready to receive the knowledge. But there is more, the translation continued, and Sarah could hear the weight of prophecy in those words. The void predators are returning. We failed to destroy them completely. They sleep in the spaces between galaxies, in the voids between stars, in the darkness between realities, but eventually, inevitably, they will wake. And when they do, the galaxy needs an alliance of warrior species who have chosen to be more than warriors. Lead them, unite them, show them that transcendence is possible. Protect what matters. The future of all life depends on what you choose next. The message ended with a single statement, rendered in language so pure it seemed to transcend mathematical encoding. We believe in you. We believe in what you can become. We believe that consciousness, when given the choice, will always choose meaning over destruction. Prove us right. Sarah looked at her colleagues, at the 5 humans standing with her in that abandoned substation, and understood with absolute clarity that everything had changed. They weren't accidents. They weren't monsters. They were hope. They were the universe's bet that consciousness could overcome design. "We need to release this information," she said quietly. "All of it, immediately. Humanity needs to know who we are." The revelation spread across Mars like wildfire consuming dry brush, moving through communication channels faster than the authorities could contain or suppress it. Within hours, the encrypted data transmission had reached Earth. Within a day, every news network on the planet was broadcasting the message from the progenitors. Every government, every military installation, every scientific institution received the complete translation. Humanity discovered what it truly was, and the entire species held its collective breath. The collective convened in emergency session aboard the Serenity's path, the vast chamber where the crystalline beings gathered to make decisions that shaped galactic policy, filling with representatives from across the known galaxy. Instead of condemning humanity, instead of imposing restrictions or implementing quarantines, something unexpected happened. The collective experienced a moment of genuine revelation. They understood, finally, what humanity had accomplished. Commander Al stood before the collective's governing body, his crystalline form glowing with a light that seemed almost like pride, an emotion rarely experienced. His geometric features caught the light, refracting it into displays of pure color that conveyed the depth of his transformation. "Came to fear what the humans were," Al said, his harmonic voice carrying undertones of awe. "We came to see them as unpredictable threats, as weapons that might activate and destroy everything we've built. But I now understand we should have celebrated what they became. They are living proof that destiny is not predetermined, that even beings designed for violence can choose compassion, that engineering is not destiny, that consciousness, when given genuine choice, will select meaning over destruction." The vote was unanimous. The collective would partner with humanity. They would help coordinate contact with the other 36 engineered species scattered throughout the galaxy. They would work together to prepare for the return of the void predators, no longer as captors and the captive, but as genuine partners in a shared mission. General stood with his daughter on the observation deck of the expanded Mars colony, watching the sunset paint the thin Martian atmosphere in shades of blue and violet that seemed to shift moment by moment. The colony had transformed dramatically in the weeks since the revelation. What had been a tense, cautious collaboration between two suspicious species had blossomed into genuine cooperation. Engineers and scientists worked side by side. Families, both human and, had begun to build lives together. Below them, in the vast construction facilities being rapidly expanded across the Martian surface, humans worked together on ships, weapons systems, defensive installations. They were preparing, not for conquest but for defense. "Do you think we can do it?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying the vulnerability of a young woman facing an impossible future. "Unite all the engineered species, stand against the void predators, protect the galaxy." Her father was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face catching the light of the setting sun. He'd spent 40 years waging war, making decisions that cost lives, struggling with the weight of command. Now, for the first time, he understood the purpose behind his species' capacity for violence. "I think humanity was built for war, yes," he said finally, his voice carrying the gravity of hard-won wisdom. "That's undeniable based on the genetic evidence. But in the process of learning not to use that capacity, of consciously choosing to transcend our own design, we became something greater. We became leaders. We became teachers. We became the kind of warriors the universe needs, ones who fight to protect, not to conquer. Ones who understand that the greatest strength is knowing when not to use your power." Across the galaxy, in 37 star systems scattered across billions of light-years of space, messages were being decoded. Species just like humanity, engineered, designed, built for warfare, were reading the same words from the progenitors. Species with names humanity would eventually learn. The ancient rivals, engineered with crystalline structures optimized for combat. The Vex, beings whose tactical thinking made human military strategy look primitive. The beings of pure energy, constrained in physical forms designed for maximum aggression. One by one, understanding their own origins, learning they were not accidents of evolution but deliberate creations of a species that had believed in their capacity for transcendence, these civilizations began to answer the progenitor's call. They began to prepare. They began to unite. The void predators would return. That war would come. That conflict was inevitable, written into the fabric of galactic history by forces beyond any individual species' control. But when it did, the galaxy would be ready. Not because any species was designed to fight, though all of them were, but because they had all chosen to stand together, because they had chosen to transcend their origins, because they had selected meaning over destruction, cooperation over conquest, hope over despair. And that choice, that capacity to transcend engineering and choose something better, made them infinitely more dangerous to those who threatened life itself. In the darkness between stars, in the void between galaxies, something ancient and terrible stirred. The void predators sensed the